boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages. It's Jesse with the Common Nerd, bringing you pop culture and all things nerdy through a common sense lens. And you know, it's one of them situations where it's not really all that shocking out there to see when something abysmally fails out there that people decide to end up trying to point fingers and end up playing the blame game. And normally this isn't something that happens too often in Hollywood out there because everybody wants to get along unless somebody's just really, really jaded and wants to call people out and stuff like that. It's kind of more of the rarity out there. And honestly, even in the video game industry as well, it's one of them situations where you don't see a lot of this kind of stuff happen out there. But one of the things that's been going on out there with Star Wars is obviously this is one of them situations where the brand is not in a good place. Since Disney bought Star Wars, Lucasfilm, and all of the rest of the properties that went along with it, we've just seen nothing more than an absolute degradation to the brand out there. From failed absolute sequel trilogy out there that, of course, a lot of the fans had many negative reactions to, and of course ended up abysmally costing the company hundreds of millions of dollars, if not downright billions of dollars, because as we know from the actual financial records, the rise of Palpatine out there ended up losing money in upwards of hundreds of millions of dollars, despite it making over $1 billion globally out there. The Star Wars television shows have been failing miserably for this series since launch out there. The ratings continue to decline series after series, and now we know things are getting drastically cut back. There's obviously been a lot of announced projects out there that simply did not go out there in any way, shape, or form. But for Ubisoft, of all places, to go out there and blame Star Wars itself for the reason why their failure of a video game absolutely ended up turning into a disastrous dumpster fire, well, it's kind of only half true, because anybody that saw what happened with Star Wars Outlaws knows exactly why that game failed. It was a broken and buggy mess right from the get-go. But of course, that won't stop Ubisoft CEO out there from passing the buck over to Disney Star Wars. And honestly, boys and girls, watching all of this kind of elite on elite crime is absolutely hilarious. By all means, blame each other, point fingers at each other, because we know you are both extremely responsible for what happened to this game. And of course, you'll all end up failing miserably. And the beautiful part about it is cost you hundreds of millions of dollars. And in the case of Ubisoft, it has literally cost them their company. So we're going to check out this article from thatparkplace.com, getting all of the juicy details of exactly what he said, and once again, give you prime examples of why he is completely and totally wrong, as well as partially right. But before we do, if you do enjoy our content, hit that like button, share with all your friends, and subscribe or follow if you have not already, boys and girls, because we are grinding, we are growing. We just crossed 2K. We're sailing our way towards 2,100, and I could not do that without every single one of you. Also, leave us a comment in the section down below. Let me know what you think about all of this. Does it surprise you at all that Ubisoft is trying to point the finger at Disney Star Wars for the failure of Outlaws? Where do you think the fault really lies? Do you think it actually falls more with Disney and what they've done to the Star Wars brand out there? Or do you think it has a lot to do with Ubisoft and the broken and buggy mess that they gave? Or do you think it's a little bit of a mix of the two? Let us know what you think about all that in the comment section down below. If you want to support the channel, please check the links in the description as well. All right, from thatparkplace.com and our dear sweet Marvin Montanaro. Ubisoft blames Disney Lucasfilm and state of modern Star Wars for failure of Star Wars Outlaws. Yeah, I'm sure it had nothing to do with the preview video that IGN was, the gameplay that IGN was showing off to everybody out there. That even as IGN was trying to promote it, saying how visually stunning the game was, anybody with two eyes that wasn't completely and totally blind could see how much of a broken, buggy mess that game actually was. And it hadn't even launched yet. It was just the preview for it. And needless to say, things weren't any better at launch. The CEO of Ubisoft has blamed Disney and the state of modern Star Wars for the failure of Star Wars Outlaws. Star Wars Outlaws, an open-world action-adventure game developed by Massive Entertainment and published by Ubisoft, was released on August 30th, 2024 for PlayStation 5 and everywhere else. Billed as the first open-world Star Wars game, it promised players the chance to explore the galaxy as a scoundrel named Kay Vess, engaging in heists, space combat, and interaction with criminal syndicates between the events of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And the funny part about this is this was originally supposed to be a Han Solo story, and if you look at the story from the outside, it's very much, obviously, this should have been a Han Solo game, but of course, because of modern identity politics, it had to be a woman. Now, didn't it? So, of course, they just conveniently placed the game right in the middle of the time where Han Solo is currently frozen in carbonite. Yeah, that wasn't intentional at all, now was it? And here's the other thing about this. Even with it being a broken mess the way it was, if Han Solo would have been the main character for this game, it would have sold gangbusters despite it being a broken and buggy mess. You'd have gotten a lot of backlash after the fact, but you've had a lot of people that would showed up right from the get-go to pre-order this game just for the chance to play as Han Solo. Instead, you had your diversity, inclusion, and equity hire, KVS, and well, we see how that's worked out over the last few years, now haven't we? Despite high expectations and a reported development budget exceeding $200 million, with some estimates suggesting up to $500 million, including marketing, those are more likely the accurate amounts. I mean, we've seen what these games have cost these companies over the past few years. $500 million is absolutely what this game cost. The game underperformed commercially and critically. That's a nice way of putting it flopped miserably. I mean, all you had to do is look at the, and we did plenty of videos over the Star Wars Outlaws debacle and how abysmally bad those numbers were on Steam and how they said it reached 5 million players, but never once told us how many people actually played the game. And this was a game that was included in a lot of bundles, discounts, and deals all over the place shortly after it came out. And yeah, not really a great way to actually show off that your game was successful. And needless to say, they finally had to admit, even Ubisoft had to finally admit at one of their earnings calls that the game was absolutely a critical and massive failure for them. Leading to ongoing discussions about its shortcomings, early Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot addressed the game's failure during a general shareholder meeting, attributing part of the blame to the state of Star Wars brand itself, indirectly pointing the fingers on behalf of Ubisoft at Disney and Lucasfilm. Outlaws launched to mixed reviews, averaging 76 to 77 on a Metacritic across platforms. Solid, but not exceptional, with praise for its world building and Star Wars atmosphere. However, it received criticisms for repetitive gameplay, technical bugs, especially on PC. I mean, it literally was and this was the funny part about this too. Even Ubisoft, with all of their patches after the game came out, flat out admitted that you might as well give up on any of the sneak abilities and like being actually be able to guide around because they couldn't fix it. They could not fix their sneak mechanic. Like you literally could not. Any of the missions you were supposed to use stealth for would not work. The stealth system was so broken and they have never been able to fix it. It's really, really sad. And a protagonist design that drew backlash for an unappealing or mismatch to the Outlaws fantasy, making an ugly character. Sales were disappointing from the start. In September 2024, Ubisoft admitted the game underperformed. Expectations with estimates suggesting it sold only about 1 million copies in its first month, far below the targets for a AAA title and such a prominent license. And we've done the math before on this channel before in the past. 1 million copies for a game that cost you just at minimum $250 million $250 million production. Let's just say their reported numbers are accurate. It's not going to work. At minimum, you have to sell like 5 million copies and more than likely 5 to 10 million copies, especially if you spend $500 million on a game to even come close to sniffing a profit. This game cost Ubisoft hundreds of millions of dollars out there. By October, Ubisoft confirmed the earnings reports, noting stagnant sales and implementing a cost reduction program that included layoffs and project delays. And the game's issue contributed to a broader crisis at Ubisoft, with stock prices tanking over 50% in 2024, and investors calling for management changes or even taking the company private. Factors cited for the flop included technical and design flaws, early access players reported bugs, a clunky stealth mechanic, which was never fixed, uninspired missions. Guillemot himself acknowledged design issues at launch. And this was the funny part too, was because everybody was telling them to hold off on this game and wait, fix the bugs, hold off on the release date, which they did with Assassin's Creed Shadows, which Assassin's Creed Shadows still flopped for them as well. Because guess what? Nobody trusts Ubisoft anymore. They have damaged their brand with deciding to do games that don't align with the brands that they've had and the IPs that fans have known and loved for a long time, and also giving you a bunch of rushed projects that are clearly cash grabs and are broken and buggy messes. And that's exactly what Star Wars Outlaws was. Price and accessibility, priced at $70 with premium editions up to $130. It faced competitions from other games like Black Myth Wukong. Cultural backlash, online discord highlighted perceived diversity, inclusion, and equity influences such as the protagonist's appearance and writing, with critics accusing Ubisoft of prioritizing agendas over fun once again. This echoed broader gaming frustrations with Ubisoft's recent titles like Assassin's Creed Shadows. So here we go from Ubisoft itself. That's all the problems with Star Wars Outlaws. Now, this is what the CEO himself flat out said. So during an Ubisoft general meeting on July 18th, 2025, which was literally just a few days ago, Guillemot was directly asked about Outlaws' failures to meet sales targets. He responded by admitting internal shortcomings, but pivoted to external factors. Outlaws was released at a time when the brand that it belonged to was in a bit of choppy waters. Absolutely no doubt about that. Star Wars is dead is something that trends pretty regularly on social media. He elaborated that there was a less than interest in the franchise at the time, suggesting the broader Star Wars IP had lost some of its cultural pull. Guillemot expressed hope for recovery and mentoring potential further improvements and a possible Nintendo Switch 2 port to boost sales. that will never happen. That's just trying to calm investors out there. But he's right. The Star Wars brand is damaged. The problem is that's not the whole story, because if the Star Wars brand was so damaged, then things like Star Wars Jedi Survivor wouldn't have succeeded and become such massive hits out there. Same thing with the sequel. Although it didn't do as well as the first one, Jedi Survivor still did very, very well, and a lot of fans enjoyed it. There is no shortage of desire to return to the Star Wars universe inside of a video game format out there. That is not the case in any way, shape, or form. But when you give us a protagonist who is very much obviously a Han Solo ripoff, except in a diversity, inclusion, and equity shell, and then you give us a broken and buggy game that even in the previews were showing us that this game was destined to fail to begin with. Star Wars' issues aside, this game was going to flop no matter what franchise it was a part of. But yes, Star Wars being a damaged brand absolutely contributed to that. But guess what? Ubisoft and Disney Star Wars deciding to make it a K-Vest story instead of a Han Solo story was guaranteed to cause problems from you right from the get-go. It's not saying that other smuggler games and with other smugglers inside the Star Wars universe cannot work. Obviously, Shadows of the Empire is one of my favorite Star Wars games, and obviously had a different smuggler who was very much like Han Solo in a lot of aspects, right? Worked. But at a time right now where the video game industry and Hollywood has taught the culture that any inkling or any sniff of a girl boss wham and power narrative, well, is a giant red flag for them, and it's going to cause a lot of fans to just tune out and tune off no matter how good your game is, because we have had this lesson taught to us again and again. And once again was another lesson taught to us by Star Wars Outlaws. These giant red flags of obviously diversity, inclusion, and equity decisions made inside of video games or television shows or movies shows us the end result. It ends up being you concentrated on that above good storytelling and giving us a game that functions on launch. And Star Wars Outlaws had both of those. A broken and buggy mess of a game, and also a storytelling that only concentrated on its diversity, inclusion, and equity, and not giving us a story that anybody cared about. And guess what? That's what's going to happen. While the Ubisoft CEO didn't name Disney or Lucasfilm directly, his comments implicitly critiqued their stewardship of the brand. Since acquiring Lucasfilm, Disney has faced accusations of franchise fatigue due to polarizing projects like The Acolyte, canceled after one season, low viewership, and backlash, and underwhelming films like Rise of the Skywalker. It's literally been like a $30 billion disaster for Disney. They have spent tens of billions of dollars on that franchise between television shows, marketing, licensing, toys, and everything else, and for none of it to be profitable. Star Wars overall for Disney is an overall loss. And that wouldn't affect the video games if it wasn't for the fact that Ubisoft gave us a broken and buggy launch. I just love the fact that they're absolutely blaming Star Wars and Disney Star Wars and what they have done to the brand. Industry analysts largely view Guillemot's blame as partial at best. While Star Wars has seen a dip, e.g. The Acolyte's failure, successes like titles like Jedi Survivor in 2023 sold well, suggesting execution matters more than brand. On forums like Reddit and NeoGAF, threads criticized Ubisoft for not addressing core issues, like unrealistic bare-fisted punches to helmets or the inability to act like a true outlaw. Disney and Lucasfilm haven't publicly responded, but licensing deals with Ubisoft remains intact, though future collaborations now seem unlikely given the fallout. And why would you continue? Why would you even bother going forward with that if Ubisoft's CEO is just going to flat out throw you under the bus and say it's your fault that the Star Wars brand is damaged and that's why our game flopped? And honestly, he's half right. The analysts are completely right. It is partially true that Star Wars is a damaged brand and it's all Kathleen Kennedy, Bob Iger, George Lucas, Dave Filoni, and everyone else over there at Disney Lucasfilm's fault. They have decided to try to make it into a girl brand. They decided to turn it into something for a modern audience, and it has cost them tens of billions of dollars. They have turned one of the most successful money printing machines out there, Star Wars, into something to where all of their toys end up at the Ollie's bargain bin, and games like Star Wars Outlaws, which we know the storyline had to be approved by Disney Lucasfilm, i.e. Kathleen Kennedy and her little council of LGBT over there. And how did that turn out for them? How has that worked out for them? And Ubisoft could have told them no. Ubisoft could have said, no, we want a male protagonist. Or at least we could have wanted a female protagonist that was attractive. But no, Ubisoft wasn't going to do that because they're just as embedded with the diversity, inclusion, an equity political agenda as Disney is. And so both of them made these decisions, and both of them caused the absolute abysmal failure that was Star Wars Outlaws. Ubisoft, by all means, blame Disney Star Wars because it absolutely is their fault. Kathleen Kennedy is the twat waffle that is destroyed, was once a money printing brand. But at the end of the day, you are just as much responsible for this as they are. You gave us a broken and buggy mess in the version of Star Wars Outlaws, and now it has flopped miserably. So yes, by all means, elite on elite crime, I am here for. Blame Disney Star Wars all you want, but also blame yourself. But at the end of the day, it does not matter. Star Wars Outlaws was a giant, massive flop. It cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars. It cost massive layoffs and is now bankrupt at Ubisoft. And you know what? At the end of the day, it's exactly what they deserve because Disney Lucasfilm and Ubisoft have both danced with the devil, and now it has cost them everything. But because they have been burned beyond belief. And Star Wars Outlaws was just the last disastrous dumpster fire to literally turn everything ablaze. And after all, they've got exactly what they deserve.